variations in how different member states prepare themselves. And this big variation comes in with different agencies in different countries don't speak to each other because, of course, they are not related. The police wants to speak to police with migration people on the other side. There's no way the immigration will want to have a conversation with the police on the other side. So we are things is that to ensure that there is improved coordination, that member states are talking to each other, and that they're not just talking to each other, but coordinating, proper coordination to ensure that the loopholes that do exist in different member states are covered. The Nairobi Declaration, the Kampala Declaration, what happens in this declaration is that we want member states to, or we facilitate member states time to time come together and review their commitment.
Somebody has said, Michelle says, that we should intentionally seek justice for the victims of trafficking of trafficking, and that's something very key. Ruth Juliet says that we should stop treating victims of human trafficking as perpetrators. Veronica says that we need partnerships. Malatho Cheng says there should be deliberate efforts to establish synchronizing support for victims of trafficking within the East African region.
I wanted to share with you the reason why we thought that having a law at the East African community would be beneficial in this quest to counter trafficking in person. Under Article 126 of the Treaty for the East African Community, there is provision for harmonization of laws. So this is one of the areas, principles which encouraged us to come up with these laws. We thought it is very important that we work together on the issue of messaging, as well as addressing the causes. These causes, of course, keep on changing and they vary. You'll find that there's provision for mutual assistance, especially in respect to cross-border crimes. So we felt that it was important that we also put it in an East African law and ensure that there's sharing of information. A discussion on trafficking in persons at this regional body, which has capacity to make laws, will continue to ensure that this issue is prioritized.
capacity build. These churches, they make using proper legal documentation that exists.
We engage more with the law enforcement so that when they are preferring the charges, they preferred. Another witnesses altogether, they sometimes get tired of waiting for their cases to be concluded in good time. And the reasons could be maybe they are tired and they need to get back to their lives, because usually the back and forth, come to court, the court is adjourned, come to court, the perpetrator that is laid on the prosecutors, they need to prove that the exploitation bit really happened. And this had been mentioned by Evelyn in the previous, the act had already happened, the transportation or the harboring or the transferring had already happened, but then this criminal activity was intercepted before the exploitation bit happened. What sometimes they usually face is that after we've protected these children, after we have ventured on ways on how to prevent them, is where the issue usually comes in, that there are so many cases, but they're usually not reported, maybe because the community intervened the light. So
it is one thing for the victim to go through the violation, they suffer a lot of impact in terms of where it can be physically, psychologically, emotionally, and even socially. But also it is adding salt to the injury if then you get to the systems that are supposed to support you and to avail you the actual redress agency. And commissioner who serves a play in that particular board is bring in the Trafficking in Persons Act that has established the victims of trafficking in persons trust fund. And in this of the trust done.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dora.
All right, I think we kindly ask the Facebook Live if you can, please.
She's not in yet, so.
Oh, she's not in yet. Okay. Yeah. All right. I would kindly ask then the other panelists. Yes, Sophie is there, and then the other panelist, Damon. Wait for her to join in. Okay, is best place to listen. As we also wait for Dora. In the meantime, Jennifer, we could perhaps play on the videos as we wait for the Special Rapporteur and Honorable Dora to join in.
Somewhat more intervention. Poverty is key. We have family that they're not necessarily, even if it is done.
To government, and what people are the key trends. And to be fast, is happening. These are the
has really gone up. One of the things, the fact that and why the issues
of trafficking do not own, and also most of the intervention counter trafficking. We've heard about school in the region and dialogue forums that are. So we have intervention depending on.
Mechanisms we can use between East African countries and responding to transnational crimes. And so what happened, there was the agreement also was to have agencies, and what do they do? 24.
We have child trafficking programs in 4 countries, that is in Kenya, Uganda, in Tanzania, but also in Ethiopia. And is actually of trafficking in persons as well as child trafficking. It can also be a solution, and we have seen practical and good examples. There are many areas we need to collaborate on, and that would include, I think you have spoken to this before, issues to do with prevention, issues to do with support services, but also issues to do with working.
Our function, our strength in the structure of the community. Civil society is not a privilege. It is something that is grounded in our treaty. Our treaty is very clear on the role of civil society and the private sector in our integration process. Bureaucracy can never drive change. Bureaucracy can never cause ordinary citizens to trigger off a sense of urgency in the community. We are working with the different chapters, members of summits, the presidents, to assent to this particular bill. Because we are dealing with human trafficking.
And you realize that the Kenyans is very important. That's an observation we made. So a lot of awareness creation is important when it comes to that.
We need to be that then can help us to get this law assented to. But I also want to say that this is also why we have, for example, actually help us to have the muscle.
The implementation is the work of the Council of Ministers, and ours is actually just to do oversight commitments where there should be.
We repatriate them back to their country, so we collaborate with these countries, and when we are repatriating them, it is from state to state, so to ensure that when they reach on the other side, of course, they're not jailed and they're able to be repatriated back to society.
We have even bigger social profits that we can gain from a cooperation with them. So I do see that in persons, especially when they are adults, happens, it's like more addressing the symptom. I think the root cause should be basically stopping trafficking of children. And then we get into a new culture of protecting people.
As the government of Kenya, at least there are many partnerships going on at the regional level through the regional economic communities, and you just need to strengthen these RECs because if you have IGAD, you have the ESC, the AU, and all that, we're able to come up with harmonized legislations, harmonized joint trainings for first-line respondents. So I think we just need to strengthen that and prioritize. I think one of the major priorities is the legal frameworks in terms of harmonization, like labor migration laws, and joint trainings for law enforcement. That's the first-line respondents. That will strengthen the regional cooperation.
We had expected the special rapporteur on violence against children. She, I think, briefly joined us in the beginning, but we are just informed that she's gone into another meeting in which they're deliberating on the strategic plan. She might join us in the course of this discussion. But be that as it may, we will still continue with this conversation on sustaining, how do we sustain regional advocacy in addressing child trafficking, to put their videos on, because we have a network of partners joining in online through our very much Damon and Sophie. We are waiting for Honorable Dora. And Honorable Dora, if you're there, you can just put your video on, but if that is not possible, then we totally understand her. The details of this discussion, as well as the outcome, the communique that we had imagined, that we had thought we'd have her, we'd share with her during this discussion. So if you allow me, Sophie Otiende is a feminist, she is a teacher, and she is also a survivor of human trafficking herself. Sophie has worked extensively with grassroots organizations for the past 10 years. Her main role has been in program development and management, including fundraising. Sophie is passionate about women and children's rights and has been responsible for the training curriculum for women entrepreneurs at the grassroots level, particularly, and also written manuals on human trafficking. She has worked with awareness against human trafficking for Africa at Liberty Shared. Sophie was also honored this year by the United States Department. Sophie, thank you very much, and we applaud you, and we thank you for honoring our invitation. Then we also have on the panel, we also have the Executive Director for Uganda Child Rights Network. Ms. is leading a coalition of child rights. He was previously the country director for Dwelling Places, which is also a Christian non-governmental organization that works with street children and children in children from high-risk families. During his tenure at the helm of the organization, over 1,800 children had been rescued and reintegrated back into their families. Over 7,000 of those children received knowledge and information on prevention on prevention. He has also served on the various ministry task force and committees, like the National Task Force on Prevention of Trafficking in Persons and the Alternative Care Think Tank, where Damon represents the voices of children. He has also was also invited and recently joined the civil society organizations in Uganda that work to advocate against human trafficking. Lastly, but certainly not least, we will have Honorable Dora Christine Kanabahita Biamukama is a lawyer by profession, and she has a master's degree from Georgetown. She served for 15 years as a legislator at the East Africa Legislative Assembly. She's very well known for her record in bringing the first ever anti-trafficking legislation at the East Africa IALA Assembly level, commissioner for 7 years. So she has a very elaborate stint in government. She is on record having drafted prevention of trafficking in persons, as well as FGM, domestic violence, and promotion of sexual and reproductive organization, which is based in Uganda, and currently doing a lot of strategic impact litigation on behalf of women. So thank you, Honorable. I wanted to just set the context for today's discussion with the listening into what the panelists have to say. So today's discussion is really a culmination of within East Africa. In the month of July, we did hold conversations around the prosecution, protection, as strategies with which we use policymakers, NGOs, sex trafficking and human trafficking at the sub-regional level to the regional human trafficking at the regional level. So dealing with at the regional level, and then we will get to understand a bit more the country context. So we all know that human trafficking is one of the most serious transnational crimes and one of the most complex human rights challenges of our times. Form of violence that is unfortunately growing fast and taking new forms. It dehumanizes children and deprives them of their dignity and robs societies. Many instances also of organ removal and prostitution of children. Child sexual exploitation also occurs. Lost a lot of sexting. And also children are being exploited in the expansive tourism industries in the different contexts here in Africa. Mutilation. Many trafficking. Indeed, is exacerbated by poverty. several reports note that child trafficking is far more detected in that girls are rarely detected as a bit more in the context of countries. The ACPF, Africa Child Policy Forum, has identified and indeed colleagues at Uganda, the Uganda Monitor, which is a local 10 to 18, and many instances of exploitation in adoption centers, by the need to acquire cash phonics. In Tanzania, we've heard often being due to poverty. Research has also, by the Tanzania Media Women Association, suggested.
We have lost you. We have lost you.
To prevent the abuse. In Kenya, in the coastal areas,
Anita.
Expansive,
Anita.
expansive tourism. Nearly
Anita.
9 into and out. Girls are discarded or abused, but they have no means of human, as I said, for human trafficking. But children, because as farms fending for their families, we've had of also very marriages. So really, and to start us off the Africa regional, Sophie, we want to understand from you, what do you understand from this problem? How does it manifest itself? Thank you.
Hi again. As you've been told, my name is Sophie Otiende, and
Sophie, we can't hear you. Sophie, we can't hear you.
Anita, I think, Sophie, we can hear you. It is Anita who can't hear us, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I think I think you've really broken down, what is this? You've broken down me. I'll just give a converse. One of the biggest gaps and one of the patriarchy, capitalism, and parcel of traffic. Again, my learn in the context of, if we don't start girls and why that is happening, it's better than the issues is the fact that I lose, and it always most of all, the people don't start looking out of something way bigger. You've mentioned we have great policies that data to basically that we need more partnership. And for me, it just feels like we are about, to be honest, tangible, where we make issues that cause trafficking supposed to be happening. I learned about child trafficking, 2 different movements, national action plans, and it's the confusion. Like right now, I'm conducting a research where I'm actually working with survivors of trafficking. And actually on this webinar, survivor involvement and the constant fact that in most of these panels, I don't see the involvement of the people that have actually been affected trafficking to tell us exactly what we need to explain. I really, really don't see it. In terms of my experience, my experience is an experience. Story could be any child's story out there, because I'm a survivor of child trafficking, but my story could be anybody's story out there. It's consistently. The thing is, the only way we address systemic issues is us getting out of this silo that we've kept ourselves in. We can't have, while I agree that it's a definition of justice, and I've worked with survivors justice from the sexual exploitation act, or if they get justice from the migration or labor law, or if they get justice from the counter trafficking in more shape. Let's not complicate things. Access to justice is very, if we focus, I'm very clear, and with issues. There are numerous organizations that are dealing with child protection issues. I do not understand how child survivors of trafficking end up in. We can't, once they've been identified as survivors of very specific at an organization that is free of data that we support victims, we are still best place. So come back to that is from there. Prioritize.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sophie, for that. And you with survivors. because survivors want justice. Survivors, and that justice needs to appear that they just want justice. Thank you also for reminding us, Sophie, that indeed we are dealing with a problem that is much the ESCRN itself. It cannot be addressed by individual governments themselves. There needs to be a much more broader collaboration and coordination of actors. But how do we stand useful in terms of disaggregating by gender, by age, so that it's responses are more in tune with the demands of the victim. So thank you very much, Sophie, for very beautiful presentation. So I just want to also allow me to say that I did not mention one other panelist. We have Afaf Al-Fadil. Afaf Al-Fadil is the general secretary us via a face Zoom connection in Sudan. So Afaf, thank you and welcome for joining us. I want to continue and listen to Mr. Damon Wamara at the time. And I think from you, I just want to put in place to address child trafficking and child sexual exploitation.
Just not a question for us to ask, but allow me just mention and give them a pat on the back that at least there are measures and there are steps that the government has put in place, who was also one of that conversations happening. It is where we are and also in that calls. So it's an all-inclusion, it fulfilled once properly financed, definitely add to the reduction of the national referral mechanism that the government with the civil society, the different government arms, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution with the police, the agreement to have investigations where it is a prosecution-led investigation pathway that is clear, and hope to now see it get into practice. Able to raise a lot of awareness in the country, to know who to read, and I think for children are to have the law in place, and that is a key aspect. One of the key results is for the community to know who's behind that child, and that child has been taken away. Help them understand what should be their response. And I think we invest a lot more in activities where you have to buy tickets. Uganda, and something we enjoy in Uganda is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and under the National Task Force, a multidisciplinary task force. It has the members from the different departments that are majorly affected by this whole virus. Labor is definitely of justice, public prosecution, who ensures that the cases are police, and that is the CID, and that just came this year in person. That is also began to trends change. It's that we are just learning a little bit.
Damon, for that that the civil society in Uganda, it just also noticed to our secretary for this. Of course, we know that within the context of the country is in conflict, we use children as child soldiers. So we know that in Sudan, children travel all the way from West Africa into Sudan. So we want to understand from Afaf Al-Fadil, and she's done Exflow.
Afaf through Facebook, because you can be able to hear her. Afaf, the Northern Africa, instability and conflict in Sudan, Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea, economic and forced labor on public transport, and medical waste. Them extremely vulnerable from rural and conflict areas, transit affected countries. Children are moved, exploitation and trafficking. Children on the move. The Children's Civil Society Organization shun streets, dangerous working conditions, and they are not exposed to trafficking. To build the institutional capacity and work and strengthen community for children presentation. I think a lot of us on. Thank you so much on behalf of Afaf.
Okay. Afaf is reminding us of the context in Sudan, colleagues, and she is highlighting the push and pull factors that exacerbate, that cause trafficking, as well as the resultant effects of Sudan is a transit and a destination country of trafficking, and we've seen in western part of Sudan necessitates child trafficking. Also, instability is actually a further ground for traffickers to recruit more children. But also importantly, she's also highlighting, the need for justice restitution. It needs systemic response to address the problem. So thank you very much, colleagues. Producer earlier, Dora Bemukama, is really known within the trafficking context. She's very passionate about legislation on human trafficking.
I'm here level. At the national level, and that's why I'm bringing this in, because unless all countries, protocol and other protocol systematic issues, need to have